Let's talk about a huge contradiction at the heart of Pakistan's future. It's this major paradox in its education system. You see, the country has these big dreams of a future powered by AI and robotics, but when you look inside many of its classrooms, well, they seem kind of stuck in the past. We're going to break down why that is. And this really gets to the heart of the whole problem, right? How are you supposed to build a high-tech, innovative future if the way you're teaching kids is based on methods from a totally different era? That's the core dilemma we're digging into today. And here it is, laid out plain and simple. On one side, you've got the official goal. Everything is about AI, robotics, getting kids to think for themselves, critical thinking. But then you look at what's actually happening in a lot of classrooms, and it's a completely different story. It's all about memorization, just repeating facts, a system designed for repetition, not for creating something new. All right, so what's the plan to fix this? Well, that brings us to our first section, the vision for a new era. Because at least on paper, there's a really clear blueprint for change. So this isn't some small-time effort. The push to modernize is coming right from the top. There was a big national summit put together by the National Curriculum Council, and its whole purpose was to completely rethink what education should look like in an age of AI and intense global competition. And when you look at the goals they set, wow, they are ambitious. The idea is to finally shift away from just memorizing stuff to actually thinking critically, to ditch this old, outdated Macaulay model, which was basically a colonial-era system built to create clerks, not innovators. The new vision's all about STEM, AI, and importantly, getting all the different provinces to actually work together on this. I mean, on paper, it sounds like the perfect roadmap. But here's the thing about a great roadmap. It's totally useless if there are giant boulders blocking the road. And that takes us to Section 2, the clash of ideas. Because the biggest barrier here isn't about funding or policy documents, it's about people. This quote just hits the nail on the head. Rigid attitudes, they're the ones physically blocking any attempt to encourage critical thinking or creativity. So it raises a really tough question. How do you teach kids to be innovative in a culture that can sometimes push back against it? And this is not just some abstract theory. Let me give you a real-world example. A school teacher filmed an 8-year-old girl who was great at cricket, posted a video of her online, and ended up facing, and I quote, acute harassment. Just think about that. When a girl simply playing a sport can cause a huge controversy, you start to understand the incredible social pressures that teachers are up against every single day. And that kind of pressure, it trickles right down into the classroom. It means that a subject like science, which should be all about hands-on experiments and asking why, is instead often taught like history, just memorizing facts from a book. No experiments, no real questioning. The famous educator Paulo Freire talked about this exact thing. He said that when education is done this way, it stops being about freeing a person's mind and becomes a tool to control their thinking. It literally inhibits their creative powers, the very thing this whole new curriculum is supposed to be building. Okay, so we've got this ideological barrier, but that's only half the story. Now we get to Section 3, where we look at the massive gap between what the policy says and what actually happens in practice. I mean, it just makes sense, right? You can have the most brilliant, forward-thinking curriculum ever written, but it's basically worthless if the teachers aren't trained to teach it, if they don't have the tools, and if there's no support system to help them. A fancy document and a binder doesn't change a thing on its own. So what's actually missing on the ground? Well, it boils down to these 5 critical things. You need real, on-the-ground support for teachers. You need actual science and computer labs with stuff in them. You need to update how we teach and how we test students. You need teachers who feel empowered and have the right skills. And you need real, genuine teamwork between the provinces. The problem is, right now, this list looks more like a wish list than a reality. And that last point about coordination, it's a perfect example of this gap. The source material points out that what often passes for collaboration is just a quick one-day visit. And let's be honest, a one-day meeting isn't a real policy discussion. It's just the appearance of making progress, not the real thing. So after all of this, where do we go from here? That brings us to our final section, because this isn't just a logistical problem anymore. It's really a question of will, political will and social will. So it all comes back to that central paradox we started with. This isn't just about writing a better curriculum. It's about bridging this massive, massive gap between a shiny, modern vision and a reality that's stuck in place by both broken systems and deeply rooted ideas. And that leaves us all with this final,
absolutely critical question. For the millions and millions of students whose entire futures are on the line, how do you take this incredible vision that exists on paper and make it real inside an actual classroom? Finding the answer to that is going to define a whole generation.